entire generation will never forgive those greedy investment bankers in US for 2008 crisis.
I'm happy. I think it made me pivot, and I can't be more grateful for that. For centuries, we have kind of followed a society structure where women are secondary to men. If it is imbalanced, then before you get the right balance, you're going to tilt to the other side as well. It's going to seesaw and it's going to go up and down. And then, we'll find our balance as a society. I was clearing up the table and my husband starts washing the dishes. And I'm just like, why are you doing this? You don't do this, please. Don't wash dishes, please. So why am I still feeling hesitant to ask them, right? So the first thing is that women need to ask for help. Often we don't do it. See, it's easy to say कि यार देखेंगे, husband तो काम कर ही रहा है. Don't do that.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have a very unique guest. I mean, somebody who's donned many hats over the years, been with legacy media, and then became a financial coach on her own. Somebody who writes very fluently, makes these personal finance concepts very, very easy. Even I struggle with making it so easy over time because probably I don't have that fluidity in writing that our guest today, Mrs. Lisa Palvi Barbora, has. She's written a fantastic book called Money and Her. My recommendation is you go on Amazon. I mean, wherever. I would prefer Amazon. I don't know why, but go on Amazon and buy it. Yeah, preferring on Amazon is because it आपके घर पे आ जाता है. That's the only thing. So with that, jokes apart, I think let's get into the discussion because the book is a lot more than what even I can describe about our guest today. So before ma'am, we start, what I'll do is I'll just run a brief statistics on what the women in India is, and then we'll try and slowly uncover the reality behind these statistics, the reality behind the stories and the narratives that have been told to us. And we'll combine that along with the book. And then we'll also open the floor to the questions if there are any. So here, I'll start with that. So basically, 39.2% of all bank accounts are now owned by women. In rural areas, it rises to 42.2. In terms of investments, women investors now represent 25% of all investors and 33% of mutual fund assets. So mutual fund ka complete AUM mein 1/3 belongs to the women investors. The demand for credit among women has tripled between 2019 and 2024, that is 3x. 60% of, again, these borrowers coming from semi-urban and rural areas. Now, gold loans. So whatever the gold loans are, 36% of all these loans belong to women. And there's also a steady rise that we've seen in business and personal loans. Now, so approximately 1/3 of women's investments are dedicated to retirement planning and children's financial well-being. Now, the sources of all these things are going to be provided in the link below in the description box. There's a marked increase in women purchasing higher insurance coverage, 44% of women opting for term insurance cover of more than 1 crore. Even what's surprising is, I mean, it's not surprising, it's delighting. Sorry for the wrong word. So what's a delightful number is that 40% of all, even the Udyam registered MSMEs are now women owned. They're borrowers, they're wealth creators, and even government is now backing them. So this is the 2025 of what we see Indian women through numbers. Now, what we'll try and do is we'll go into the book, we'll go into each individual stories that our guest today has literally, uncovered for us. And we'll also see how that it translates into our lives. So thank you so much, ma'am, for accepting our invitation today and, being a part of this show.
Thanks, Jinay, and please feel free to call me Lisa. I was listening to the data that you were saying, and I think what it does is that at least it shows us the intent, which is from a structural and policy point of view, there for women to kind of move forward. There are gaps, however, and I should mention this because it's important for people to know. So things like, where there are bank accounts or mutual fund investments, a lot of it is done in the name of the woman, but women don't have real control over that money. The other statistic which was interesting is the gold loan part of it. So, sometimes for women, that is the only option left because, as we know in our society, the asset transition happens to the male child and not necessarily to the women, to the female child. So, when they do need a loan for their business, instead of property, what they have is gold, which doesn't give them as much value in terms of size of the loan, but it's a start. But having said that, like I said in the beginning, the intent is directionally in the right way, but there is a lot more work to be done in this space to get women to actually start controlling these money choices and decisions.
I think that's brilliantly put. At least the intent is now being seen. So with that, we'll come to the book. So first, I want to understand the inspiration for the book, and it's a very beautiful story. You talk about, yourself and your son walking on the streets of Switzerland, and there's something that happened. So I really want you to talk about that story because it also resonated with me on certain levels.
Yeah, so interestingly, when I was writing the book, there was a hesitation in sort of including any personal feelings or this thing. But then I realized I am a woman. I cannot kind of segregate, some of this. So I've tried to keep it very focused. But the story you talk about was my own tryst with this whole insecurity around money, etc. And yes, we were on a family vacation, and in my house, actually, I plan all the vacations, and and we don't usually use a travel agent or anything, so everything is done by me. And what was happening is, and of course, when you travel overseas, you figure out how you're going to use different payment modes, etc., so that everything is coherent and you're not struggling when you're not in your home country. And the way we did it was a certain way, and which was to be really. So the thing is that what we did was, we put all the hotel stays on my husband's credit card, and we were going to spend everything else, which is, when you're either you're shopping or eating or whatever, on my card. And that's how we had divided it, knowing the what do you say, the limits, and knowing exactly how we are spending, so that we don't get stuck anywhere and it's kind of seamless. Now, my son noticed this, right? Obviously, we had not told the kids. This was just something I had arranged, and I told my husband, we'll use your card for this and my card for this, and it was fine. And my son noticed this, but he noticed it slightly differently. And we were walking, and he says to me, and we just left the hotel and we were going somewhere. And he says to me, Mama, you know, you've made all the bookings. So because I made all the bookings, when we reach hotels, there, it's my name is always there because I made the booking. But when we're leaving and we are paying, my husband always takes out his card, right? So that is what he noticed. He said, Mama, your name is there when we reach, but he always pays when we leave. It was, he was just making an observation, right? That your name is there, but he is paying. And to me, however, it was a bit of a dagger. It just said, oh, you're doing all the spending and he's doing all the paying. And, in my household, we don't separate his money and my money. It's all, everything is in a pool, everything, investments, banks, everything. So we don't separate. And there was never a question of his money or my money. So there was no need for me to feel, I suddenly felt, oh my God, what is going on? Is this true? Is he earning and I'm spending and we're being, I don't know what happened in that moment. I just felt like, a dagger hit me or something. And in that minute, I was very, very, very angry somehow. And I lashed out at my son and I said, what is this? And you don't understand. And I do XYZ things at home and I work and I do. And how can you say, I don't, I don't think he was even thinking so far. He had just made an observation. That when we come in, it's your name, and when we go out, it's, my father's name. He's paying. So it was only me, and of course my husband didn't care. But I'm just saying that it's something that's inside me, which has no relevance in our lives, actually, the way we live our lives. And I shouldn't be insecure because I manage the entire investments in our family, and I manage all the money. So I don't know where it came from. But the point of sharing that story was to say that as women, we have so much insecurity within us. And if I have it, then I can bet that a lot more women have it. And when it comes to money, that insecurity can lead to so many other complications in life, can lead to women becoming sometimes small, sometimes viewed as, if they're go-getter kind of ambitious women, then they're viewed in a different way. If they're stay-at-home women, then it's so much labeling, and all of it comes from, yeah, society, but also the insecurity within us. And while the conversations are not about money in these cases, always, but the underlying context is always money. And so I thought that that was the thing, that maybe stories of women who have actually managed to kind of control their money choices and outcomes can help nudge women who feel small and invisible when it comes to this topic, to kind of take charge as well.
So I think while I was just going through the book, and it was very natural of me to ask you, this is what I felt, is there a sense of crisis in terms of identity that, hey, you know what, I'm here. I am also contributing as much as you are. Is, is, is that sense always there within and even reflected elsewhere? Because I think it's in one of the chapters or some that where you write even a small. So if a girl is 8 year old, she's accompanied with a 3 or 4 year old boy as her own protector. So she's nudged into thinking that this man who's a 3 4 year old guy will take care of me. However, it doesn't work like that. He can be knocked out. I mean, in any case, in a bad situation, if that is to persist. But uh, that's that's the rooting, right?
I think it's just how society functions, right? And it's not new, it's centuries old. So it's not going to change overnight either. It'll have to take its own time. And in the process of change, as it always happens, but in any kind of change, if it is imbalanced before, which in this case it is, because uh, for centuries we have kind of followed a society structure where women are secondary to men. So if it is imbalanced, then before you get the right balance, you're going to tilt to the other side as well, where it is going to be an imbalance. And you'll find there's a lot more assertiveness than maybe it's required in certain situations, etc. Because look, we've lived with so many decades of imbalance. So that's not going to happen overnight just because you wish it to. It's going to seesaw, and it's going to go up and down, and then we'll find our balance as a society. But this whole thought process of women being overshadowed, what you said about the children, by men, is okay when you're younger. You can still deal with it. When you start growing older, when you get married, that's when things really start to change. And that's when you're left questioning. For some time, okay, there is there's the responsibility of young children, etc., so women make their peace with that. But once that goes away, um, it's too late by then if you haven't already figured it out that you are a person uh, other than the roles you play in life. And somewhere we women take on that role so seriously that they forget that they're also an identity, a person themselves. And that identity needs to be fed as well.
Yeah, I mean, so if when we talk about, let's say at least for us, our mothers were primary caregivers, unpaid sort of a labor work at home. There was nothing that it, there was a sense that since they didn't go out of the house to work, the whole system was our father is the one who is working the hardest.
Mhm.
These are the thoughts that we've been brought up with. Okay. And this actually is a very big thing of its own, because uh, when we talk about that, and you've brought that up in chapter 6, like let's take Arti's case, and here is a woman. Let's say, so here is a woman. She's doing both, right? She's working as well as taking care of the child. Yet expectations of managing the home, traveling 40 kilometers in a city like Mumbai, where 5 kilometers is a challenge of its own. Uh, Coming back, doing all the household work, expecting to raise a kid, and not being actually given that sort of a due. So that is first. And secondly, I would also like to talk about the fact that really that stirred me up was the home loan scenario. So the home loan is taken through her salary. So she's got to repay it. Uh, Yet the asset, the house, is in the husband's name. The reason I really want to talk about this is because when I told Namrata, my wife, कि यार ऐसा तो कुछ होता नहीं है, ये क्या लिखा हुआ है बुक में, she's like, you're a rich brat brought up in a certain set of society. She gave me a list of a few people that we know, and she's like, ये सबके घर में ऐसा हो रहा है. So she gave me a very hard knock of
Reality.
what reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, reality is a good way to put it. It was a different punch that she'd given me, but yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk about Aarti a little bit. So I'll tell you, I haven't faced this kind of discrimination either, ever. And I'm lucky I have a supportive, when I say supportive husband, but really a partner for a husband. I mean, we've never had to discuss this, right? It's always just kind of fallen in place, and whoever is more adept at a certain thing takes the responsibility for that. In Aarti's case, you have to understand, yes, there was a big mismatch. She made a big mistake. And this is a woman, and women think that financial independence is your ability to earn. It is a part of it. Aarti was a lady who was earning from the age of 22. At 40 or 41, she got divorced and she did not have any asset to her name. Why is that? Why did that happen? That happened because when she got married, she trusted her husband and his family, and they created assets. Because in India, we give a lot of importance to real estate as an asset. They created two real estate. Firstly, when she got married, they were deeply in debt, her husband's family. And she didn't know that before marriage. So a part of her income was, getting into the family pool, and obviously she couldn't save anything because they were busy paying off debts. Then they created two property assets, and she was paying towards them. In one, her name was on the loan as well because she worked with a bank and she could get favorable rates, but her name was not on the asset. Just because you're paying for the liability doesn't automatically mean your name is on the asset. And she made a mistake. Let me put it really clearly. Whatever they were doing, we can't, I want people to take responsibility for their own actions. Whatever somebody else was doing, fine. But it was her mistake to not, and she was told to question it. And she decided to trust. A lot of women do this. We decide to trust. But look, not long after that, she was in a situation where things were not working out. And she was desperate to, because it was just, it was making her emotionally very vulnerable. So she was desperate to get out of that situation. And when she brought it up with her husband, and she said that, look, we don't have that kind of connection anymore in our marriage, and I would like to move out. Let's just divide the assets. He turned around and said, what assets? You don't have anything in your name. And that's when it hit her. She didn't even realize till then that, this could happen. And this is not the first case. I'll let you in on a little story. I had another story for divorce, which was her Aarti's case is solved in court and they've got their divorce. But my earlier story was a lady whose case was not fully resolved. It's still in court. But the story is no different. There is financial bullying at every level. It was a love marriage for 20 years, and the financial, and this is educated, well to do people, but the financial bullying is push that lady to a corner. And they have young children, and these are just two stories. There are so many like this, right? Aarti's case is a bit more layered because she grew up in a household where, and I've mentioned some of this at the start of her story, where her mother did a lot of housework and work outside, and there was no distinguishing in terms of gender what work needs to be done at home. So the women did all kinds of handiwork also, they did kitchen work also, they did everything. So the when she got married and she had to do all that work that you were talking about, she had to go out and work and she had to do work at home. She wasn't opposed to that. She didn't mind that. The issue was that there were gender roles, so the kitchen work was only hers. And there was nobody contributing to it. As the daughter in law of the family, she was expected to do certain things. She had been brought up in a way where it was very different. There were no gender roles around the housework, it was everybody's work. And she got married into a space where suddenly she realized that just because she's a certain gender and a certain role in the family, a certain this thing that she is the daughter-in-law, she needs to do these things. And that issue was underlying in the marriage for a long time. So when the divorce happened, it didn't have, I don't know about him, but for her, it wasn't sudden. It was a buildup of years of playing a role which she was never comfortable playing. And her divorce has had big fallout for her in terms of her family life, her child, and everything. So it was not easy and not easy to do. And she didn't do it for a while because she didn't feel financially secure, because she felt that, I don't have any money. What am I going to do? So even after asking him for a divorce, she stayed in the marriage because he said, what, you don't have anything. I don't have to give you anything. So she stayed thinking that, oh no, what am I going to do? And then one day she took a choice and she made a choice rather, and she took a step and moved out. And she continues to work through all of this. She continued to work. She continued to do well at work. She continued to get her promotions. So, yes, women can do this. They can work, but let's equip ourselves with the knowledge and awareness required to also manage our money in a way that works for our life aspirations. If those life aspirations are joined with your family, then at least you should be sharing your thought process around those aspirations. You should be sharing what you think can be done. And you can only do that when you have the knowledge and the awareness of how money works. Not just how to earn money, but how it works. Don't delegate that second part to somebody else.
And you also talk about the fact that take a note of your household chores, like you talk about the gender rules for household work and the unpaid labor, but at least have a sense of confidence and integrity on that part, that you are contributing in a certain way. So you are also spoken about that.
Yeah, we all have to, right? It's our home. We will do whatever we need to do for our home, but let's not put, gender roles around it.
Okay. And so let's say, if any of our listener today, it's not, it might not be, but if any of our listener today, probably might get married or into a family where they might have to do even the household chores, and which is probably still expected of sorts, how should they view it in terms of, demanding a compensation of some sort from their husband or a recognition of sorts?
So, firstly, these days there are a lot of ways to outsource some of this work, right? So, if the work is not something you like to do, try and get external help. Secondly, COVID has taught us a lot, right? Has taught us that anyone is capable of doing housework. Earlier, it was so strongly in the woman department, but now we know, or even hiring help, even that gets left to the woman. Okay, if you want to outsource the work, you hire the help. So there is, there are no many ways to do this, but the only way to do this is to communicate with your spouse clearly and openly that, look, I don't like to do this work. And I'll give you an example at my home and how we are conditioned, right? And I'm talking about women, how women are conditioned. Every now and then, when we have a full-time help, like a lady who stays with us and helps us around the house. And when she's sometimes, not there, she's gone back to her home or whatever. We don't have anybody to do dishes because she does the dishes. And night dishes are the biggest problem because you're tired, right, by the night. And we are a 6-member family. My in-laws and my children are there, so there is a lot of dishes, and there's the laying of the table, then clearing up the table. All of that is there. So just by default, I was clearing up the table, and my husband starts washing the dishes, and I'm just like, why are you doing this? You don't do this, please. Don't wash dishes, please. And he's like, why? You do the clearing up. I don't like that part. I'll do the dishes. And we have a dog. And when we finish all the work around dinner and everything, we take her for a walk. And he said, then we'll take her for a walk. So everything can finish at one time and we are free to take her for a walk. But my reaction always to him washing dishes is why, or even till date, and we've been married a while, but even till date, it is always, why are you doing the dishes? This is our conditioning. Why can't we communicate with our spouses, and why can't we tell them? And I hate doing dishes. Like, that's the worst thing. I've trained my children also. My boys also watch it. They also like it, but I don't like it. So why am I still feeling hesitant to ask them, right? So the first thing is that women need to ask for help. Often we don't do it. We don't ask for help. It's not so much about compensation or getting paid or whatever. Husbands do give their wives some kind of, money to spend around the house or whatever else they want to go shopping with, but it's given in a way which is not very uh, dignified always. I'm sorry to say this, but that's how it is. It's not very dignified. And I believe that every woman should work. Every woman should work and figure out her own capability of earning. Yes, you want to take a break from your work because you feel your family responsibilities are pretty high. Do that, knowing that you yourself are capable of earning. Only then you'll get the confidence that even if you're at home doing work around the house, you are taking out time from being able to do something else which is remunerative, and you're giving time at home. That's when you'll have the confidence to ask your husband that, look, I'm also taking out time to do this. I understand you're going into work, but this is not always a happy place for me. Let's admit all these things, right? It's not always a happy place. You, who likes to do chores? Yeah, there will be some chores you don't like to do, but women have to do it because they're at home. So we have to start communicating better. We have to explore our ability to earn before we get married so that we have a sense of who we are. What is our identity? Then when we get into situations like marriage and taking care of family, we make our choices. How much of that work do I want to give up? Or how much of that identity do I want to pause and keep aside? So it's not as simple as compensation, because that can, start to eat into a relationship. It can feel transactional. It can start to cause issues. And husbands do share money, but maybe they don't share enough information. I'll tell you another very interesting thing, that after reading my book, two of my friends came to me and they said, after reading your book, we went back to our husbands and we asked them about investments and things like that. What do we have and in whose name and blah, blah. And we had a fight. This is also a reality, right? Because for so many years, this person has been doing something and suddenly somebody goes and questions. Human beings have some sort of ego, right? Everybody's not going to give it up like that. So we have to begin our relationship with open communication. You have to begin as women your lives with understanding your abilities as an individual, your identity as an individual, and then decide what you want to do with that identity. Sometimes you'll be forced to put a pause on that identity, and that's fine, but at least you'll know where to pick up. So there are a lot of nuances and layering to this. There is no excuse, however, to not participate in family finances, even if you're not working. So even if you're at home, you're not working, always be able to participate in family finances and that decision making. And that will come once you build your knowledge, once you build your communication. It's not about challenging the rest of the family or your husband or whatever. It's about doing things together, collaborative work rather than, a challenge, really.
Interesting. And, in fact, you give me a new idea too, because even when we have late evening dishes and, sorry, and the house help is not coming that day, my wife always tends to fight with me saying, no, no, I'm the one who'll do the dishes, not you. Probably, because I don't know, I just enjoy doing the dishes late in the evening because you turn on the music and,
So
you
many of us don't even know that men like doing dishes. And
I think what happens is that during the day, so now we are in the knowledge world, right? I mean, we don't work with our hands as much. So we don't work with the body so much. We're completely in the knowledge
right,
world.
right.
So in the evening, when you get the opportunity to do something by your hand and enjoy the music at the same time, so she's got this huge fight with me that, you know what, you'll take half an hour to do a 15-minute
Yeah,
job.
that's true. It's very true.
So, so I always tell her that, it's my fun that you don't like it. But in now that I realize there is also a very deep layered conditioning that, don't have him do the household work.
It is. It rests in all of us. And like I said, it's decades of conditioning. So it's not going to go overnight.
Correct, correct. Great. So with that, I'll also let's go into the second part of this, that women with ambition is. And there's this chapter of Smriti Khandelwal that you talk about. Now, very honestly, I feel that what you felt has not really come out. What the story that you wanted to say is a lot more than what has been written down, is what I felt actually after reading the chapter. Not sure if I felt the correct thing because probably as a reader, I might wanted, there might be a space where I felt that I wanted to know more. And as readers, we are always unforgiving on the authors that why didn't you write an XYZ thing more? So here is a woman, Smriti, she's got a husband who, you know, uh, steps down from the Indian Naval Services to help her go one step forward. It's very unconventional. So please, I mean, walk us through it.
Okay, first, do tell me, how do you feel that it was not whatever? I mean, what part of it did you feel that about?
I don't know how to say it, but so it's correctly brought out. There's nothing like that, but somewhere. So, like how you've brought out, probably, let's say, for example, RP's emotions or others' emotions
Mm-hmm.
in the whole
Mm-hmm.
area, or even, Gauri or Pooja, whatever people. Here, I found a lack of her emotions coming in. So, there is no, uh, it's a very smooth ride, right?
Right,
It's,
right. I get you.
वो थोड़ा सा डर लग
That
जाता है.
that's
Yeah.
because Smriti is a person like that.
Okay.
So every story in the book really is drawn from the protagonist of that story and her energy,
Correct.
which I've tried to translate. And Smriti is a person who was always sure of herself. There's very little vulnerability that you get from her. She is always sure, and they let. Of course, their story is unconventional. So for the listeners, both husband and wife were on a great professional track. Her husband was in the Indian Navy, and he was doing well, getting promoted, and she was in private service, and she was also doing well, getting promoted. And they were married for 12 years before they had a child. And while they were married for those 12 years, it was really like a long distance relationship because he's in the Navy, he had to be in certain places, and she couldn't always be there. It's assumed that, okay, if the husband is in the armed forces, you will follow the husband, right? She didn't. Like I said, she didn't have any insecurity in that sense or any vulnerability of who she was, and she did whatever she wanted to. Um, he uh, they had to change tracks once they had their child. For some time, his parents stepped in and to take care of their daughter, and there were periods which were stressful. And then eventually they decided that time had come that one parent needs to be available to the child, more available to the child rather. And that's when they sat down and they spoke and they spoke and they spoke. And they came to the conclusion that from all perspectives, financial included, it would make more sense for her to continue and for him to change tracks. Remember, he was in the armed forces. Also, if he left, he would still continue to get a pension. So her giving up work would mean no income, whereas his changing tracks or giving up work would mean some income is still coming through, right? So this was not a decision made only on the basis of what they wanted to achieve professionally, but it was very much a financial decision as well for their future. What you should read, and where you will, or you may have read, and where you will get a lot of that emotion, is that I have included, after some of those sections, I have included what men think about women taking charge of their money and women being financially independent. And instead of going to random men, I went to the husbands of some of these women and I got them to share their emotions around it. And her husband does. There is a part where, he's talking about what it means for him personally and professionally. And you'll find that there is a lot of, there were moments of doubt. And even after he gave up and they had moved abroad for her work, etc., there were times where they had serious fights, emotional fights. But because the decision was taken with complete awareness, complete transparency, complete communication, there was nobody else that they could go back and blame, right? So they would fight it out. And the understanding was that, look, this is a decision we took, and now we have to make it work. There was a reason we took this decision. And they are very methodical people, and they are very on the ball with their finances. But he has his investments, she has his investments, and while they are nominees, etc., they are not joint holders. This is how they have thought of it. Some of it is there in their personal finance report card, which is at the end of the chapter. They're not joint holders because they feel it's, life can go anyway, anytime, and they want to keep it as simple as possible. But there is complete transparency. Everybody knows how much the other one's investments are, etc. So their story I wanted to include because it is unconventional, because for many women, even if they want, they will not make this choice, or they will not let themselves make this choice of giving up, of not giving up their work, and even talking to their husband that, maybe it may work out for us as a family if you are the stay-at-home parent and not me. And they faced a lot of opposition, especially from the parents, because both the parents are from armed forces, from the Air Force, in fact. And so obviously the parents didn't understand why, armed forces officer who's on an upward path is going to give it up in between, because that's the life they led. So there's lots more in Smriti's story, a lot of small nuances, like the house that her in-laws live in right now. And this is not in the story, but the house that her in-laws live in right now is actually a property that she invested in and she paid off. But on the plaque, at the bottom of a building, you have the names of people. It's her husband's name. And her mother-in-law will always say, "Mere bete ka ghar hai." But it's with Smriti's money, right? Not that the husband-wife don't see it like that. But whenever, she's in a setting with relatives and the mother-in-law is saying that, "Ye mere bete ka ghar hai," she has to raise her hand and say, "Excuse me, ye mera bhi ghar hai," So there are a lot of these small things, which obviously, I can't include everything, but it's very interesting how society views so many of these things, and how women have to fight their way. And it's not seen in a very good light if women are fighting their way for some of this stuff.
I agree with it completely. And so let's say, for our listeners, if there's anybody, who wants to get married, and how do they basically have this sort of a conversation with their husband, who, or for even, let's take it from a boy's point of view also, like how does that couple have that very honest and sincere conversation around money? A, because they might not have seen this happening in their own home, so uh, they might not understand the whole value of it. उनके लिए खाली इतना होता है कि हाँ मतलब if let's say at a certain date something bad happens तो इनको इतना पता होना चाहिए, but not on a day to day and a regular basis.
So I think the conversation firstly has to happen before you get married, not after, because marriage often is seen as a finality, right? We don't really get into marriage thinking that we won't be married later, and we try our best to make things work in a marriage. So have the conversation before. And it's not a very serious conversation in a sense, but it's just you trying to understand what the views of the person you're getting married to are around certain things like, spending, saving, investing. And if the lady starts to bring this up, if the woman in the relationship starts to ask these questions, how the man reacts, well, that's your first cue on where you are headed. And it's the first story where this was mentioned, which is of a single lady where she wants to get married, but when she meets these men and she asks them about investments and things like that, they feel intimidated, they feel threatened by her. So obviously she doesn't take things forward. So if that's what I'm saying, before you get married and you're on a lunch date or something, after the first few lunches and dinners, and the romantic stuff is out, why not just try and figure out, and it could be a fun kind of what is that thing called where you reply quickly, somebody asks you something and you reply in a word, make it a fun game or something, don't make it very serious, but try and get a sense of how your would-be partner, life partner, thinks about money, how much they are willing to go into debt for what, for building, are they frivolous spenders? It's not really about how much money they have, but it's about the attitude towards money, attitude towards spending, attitude towards sharing. And if they're not sharing, that's a red flag for women, I think. So yeah, figuring out money attitudes before you get married for the man also, and for the woman especially, is very, very important. There was a story in the newspapers just a few months ago about it's a tier 2 town in Maharashtra only, where there was a marriage proposal from a boy to a girl, and her maternal uncle went and got his CIBIL score from the bank. Now, how, I don't know. Maybe he was working for the bank or whatever. And that CIBIL score was disastrous. So he said, nahi karni shaadi isse. So I'm not saying go and get the CIBIL score, but understand money attitudes. It will help you both. And if you start that conversation even before you're married, both of you know what you're getting into, which none of it is a deal breaker. If your would-be partner is a spendthrift, it's not a deal breaker. It's just awareness of what you're getting into. And it helps. It really does.
I fully agree to it. How does it matter? I mean, if see the spendthrift part and all, if it is discovered post marriage, then it's an issue. If it's something that you can deal with before that, I think things are a lot more smoother.
Yeah.
So now I would like to move on to entrepreneurs, so women entrepreneurs. So we've also discussed Gauri's case here, how she starts a company and does very well with it. Now, along with that, what we've also seen over the course of our times is even from Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw to I forgot her name, Sugar Cosmetics, Vinita Singh. Now, the ability to raise funds is a little tricky because somewhere, men, I mean, in terms of, so these are numbers, even Saurabh Mukherjee has written in his book, and I think even he's written in the prologue of your book. So, sort of saying that women, I mean, in terms are perceived as better capital allocators, but tend to still get a lot lesser capital from the venture capitalist investors. So It's a very tricky thing, and how do they deal with it? How should they deal with it is what I wanted to ask.
So there's no easy way. As you see in case of Gauri's story, she falls, she gets up, she falls, she gets up, kind of thing. Um, I would really lean in on Lakshmi's story for this, uh, because she's relentless in her pursuit for perfection in her work, and she forgets her gender in that pursuit. Not in any other way, but in saying that, I'm not capable, or ever doubting that she's not as capable. And she's in a profession which is highly male dominated. She started 25 years ago, it was highly male dominated. Today, also, it is highly male dominated. Things may have changed a little bit, but not significantly. At least in fund management. I'm not talking about AMC employees. There are many women, but in fund management, it's still very, very limited, right? As percentages, very low. And Vinita Singh, for example, um, or you used Kiran and Vinita's example. They both may have found it hard to begin with, but both of them didn't question that hurdle on a gender platform, or didn't make a big deal about it. They just kept doing what they needed to do to achieve the outcome they needed. And eventually, now capital is not an issue, nothing is an issue, right? Because they have, yes, women need to work harder, maybe in that sense, to prove their mettle, because there are a lot many more men vying for that same capital or that same professional position, if you're working for an organization. So you have to kind of battle your way through, but it's not impossible to do. And if there is a ambition, if there is a will, you can get there. Having said that, all women need not be ambitious. So that is not, the point of this. I don't want any of our listeners thinking कि मुझे भी ऐसा ही करना चाहिए क्या. Well, if you are ambitious, you will do it. Don't let your gender stop you from what you are good at doing. Capital allocation is tougher for women. It's very tough for a lot of startups, even run by men. It's tough. It may be tougher for women, but it is anyway tough. So वो भी fight कर ही रहे हैं. So the thing is that don't let your gender make you feel disadvantaged if you are good at what you do. And I think that's the takeaway really here. And also that just like all men are not ambitious, all women are not ambitious, which shouldn't stop them still from owning their financial agency, from figuring out their identity, which is always linked to something that you do outside of your home. It could be linked to your home, but how can I say, women of various age groups who I've spoken to, from like 20s to 80s, at some stage in their life, if they haven't explored their identity outside of the roles that they play in the family, regret it. I don't know a single woman who doesn't regret it, right? So I would really encourage that explore your identity. It needn't be one that's ultra ambitious, but if you are ambitious, then just strive for the work you do. Just the work you do is important, not your gender.
I think it's very interesting. I mean, you brought out the fact that it's capital raising is any which way is a very, very difficult stuff. Just brought me to, I mean, so there are a few startups that had asked us to evaluate them, and I'd gone to meet with them. And the one thing that I saw, I mean, in the Gen Z and millennial, this is my whole experience of things, is that the girls out there were very far more knowledgeable, technically brilliant, not just advanced. They were brilliant at presenting whatever queries that my team had, and yet they would step back. They would so when so this when we would ask a question, if in a certain situation, if so we do a lot of situation analysis with them when we are thinking of investing. So if in this situation XYZ happens, then how are you going to deal with it or whatever. What I had observed was that they would first look at the male counterpart, getting a go ahead, and then they will talk. Despite of being the most technically brilliant, and I had to step in and say that to the guys, why don't you shut up and let her answer?
It's because we think that we need permission. And that is one thing also I've mentioned in the book, and it can be in any situation. The situation you describe is where they are pitching, their startup idea and raising funds. It can be a situation at home. It can be anything. We seek permission. Why? We are our own individual, independent person. If you want to do something, and this is something that I have never done with in my own personal situation, and hence I know that it's not a given that you have to. Uh, I always ask my husband for his advice, and I'll always, because as you had started, my journey has not been. I mean, I'm a person who likes to do many things. So I, before doing something, I'll check in with him. But he's not the only one I check in with. I check in with a lot of other people. But I make my choice, and then I just tell him that, okay, you know what, I'm doing this. Let's have that confidence, right? A lot of women, and there was this in one workshop that I was doing, there was a lady, and she doesn't work outside the home, and she's part of a family. And she said, you're so right, but how can I ask my husband? I feel very guilty asking him some of these money aspects. So it's she feels guilty asking because she's not contributing to the earning pile, right? So she feels for anything she needs to ask for his permission first. If he is okay, then she can do. So this is again going back to that age-old conditioning. And my God, there are examples galore where women do really well and they have the support of their family. We have to give ourselves confidence. We cannot expect that also we are waiting that the men will change. Tab wo hame denge, the ability to ask. No, you have to build it within yourself. And all of this comes down to your financial agency, your identity linked to work which you are valued for, which is outside of the role you play in your family, which you are valued for enough to be paid. Maybe there is a pay gap or whatever, but somebody is there who is willing to pay you a certain amount. Figure this out before you take on so many other roles in life, which is going to be a lot more complicated, a lot more confusing in terms of what do you do next. I encourage all young women to actually figure out their own identity first. A lot of this gets resolved if you embrace that.
So very true. So true. I think you've summed it up very well. The next part of the segment, I mean, where we'll talk about, maternity leaves and career breaks. So this is it's a situation that I've seen in a lot of my friends. Anxieties of going into it. You're doing one way very well in your career. You are expanding. I mean, I've seen my friends, jumping leaps and bounds in their careers, double promotions throughout. And yet, because the way they see it, it's a biological clock ticking. I mean, of course, we tend to not see. Sometimes we don't tend to see it that way as men. We just, uh, it's probably a pressure of the family. It's whatever. But there's so much anxiety going through. There's so much this sense of worry, sense of fear. Because there was this one friend, she was telling me that if I go into a maternity leave, have a kid, and my kid needs me for the next 2 to 3 years, and after I come back, because the software and the AI industry tends to double every 2 years, right? So if I go out of the work for 3 years, and when I come back, it's suddenly a very new industry for me. It's a different coding language, it's a different way of functioning. So those anxieties and all that they deal with. So what should they do? How should they, cope up with is, I think you've also brought it out in Neerja's story, but uh, I felt that, of course, that was again one thing that you said, that it was still 4 decades ago, right? 40 years ago that she took this decision, and yet she came out on the top. So, how should these girls, actually think about it?
So I think Neerja said it right. And she said that, uh, and remember, she started working in the 80s, I guess,
Hmm.
where firstly women were not really going out and working. She took a 6 year long career break, and then she got back into the workforce. And by the time um, she retired, her goal at retirement was to have a passive income which was equal to her last drawn salary. And she achieved that goal. And she said it. She said in a 40-year-long career, she worked for the rest of her. She's, you know, much older now, so she worked for the rest of her working life. And she said in a 40-year-long career, the 6 years were a blip. I had a fulfilling career. Those 6 years did not matter for the rest of the time that I worked as a professional. But it's not by default that happened. When she did take a career break because she had her first child, and she had initially thought she'll go back to work in maybe 2 years, but she had her second child, and the career break extended for 6 years. But just because she had her children, she didn't stop uh, keeping herself updated, or she didn't stop, what do you say, skilling herself. She continued to do some freelance work in, she was in advertising. She continued to do some freelance work in market research throughout her career break. So whatever projects came her way, whatever she could do, she delivered. And at the end of the 6 years, when she was ready to go back, she went back to the company which was giving her all that work anyway. Excuse me. And within 3 years, she took over the office of that, the office that she joined back. She was heading it. How did she make it happen? Because, firstly, just because she had children, she didn't say that, okay, I won't equip myself professionally either. So, for 6 years, yes, she was a stay at home mom, but she was also doing some freelance work which helped her keep updated with her industry. I'm sure that the software and AI industry has a lot many more opportunities. This I'm talking, not even, we hadn't even hit 2000s, right? And today, you don't even need to be working for somebody to keep yourself updated in any field that you work in, because digitally we are so much more advanced, we can do a lot more. So there is no excuse for you to not use the time that you have a little bit towards your own upgrading and updating yourself. Also, while you manage the children, you have the privilege of being at home to manage your children. A lot of women who are in the lower middle class don't even have that privilege because they can't make that choice. They have to continue to go back to work, our house helps, etc. They have their babies. They can't take 6 year long career break, right? They have to go back. They don't have the privilege that you do. You have that privilege. You can sit and keep updating and upgrading yourself so that whenever you're ready. Monica's story is also there. And she went back into full time work when her daughter said to her that, and it was after 7 years, and she said that, Mama, everybody's mother goes to work. Why don't you go? And she said, Ki, yaar, my daughter is only telling me, I think it's high time I go back. And Monica Hallan, this is. And she aced her career after she came back. And she continues to ace it. So that's what Neerja said. She said, in 40 years of working, 6 years is nothing. And we must, however, keep ourselves updated throughout. Secondly, when you go back to work, the lines have to be very, very clear. You are accountable at work and you are accountable at home. That leaves women very little time, at least in the initial years, to socialize and a lot of those things. So you decide what you want. Like I said, everyone is not ambitious. So be very clear about how you want to manage your career once you're back. What is your ambition? If your ambition is to move up in your career, you have to define lines very clearly, saying if Neerja defined it, saying that if I get a call from home, no matter what meeting I am in, you will call me out. Monica defined it by saying that, I will spend the time at work where I am working. I will not spend any extra time. And she got a lot of flack for it. because people view it differently. I've been told several times, oh, you're a part-time worker. When I was working full-time with Mint, I was not a part-time worker. It's just that I didn't socialize or network beyond what I needed to because I had young kids at the time. So you have to define it, and it's totally doable if you commit to keeping yourself updated, if you commit to understanding what you want to achieve by going back to work. If it is just a means of spending some time outside, getting a salary which is fulfilling for you, that's fine. Then you don't need to, fight for those promotions, etc. But that's also okay, nothing wrong with that. So yeah, some of these things we need to start thinking through. We need to start saying, rather than, for women, see, it's easy to say कि यार देखेंगे, husband तो काम कर ही रहा है. Don't do that. Don't do that. Think about yourself first. Because believe me, 10 years later, when your child is all grown up, teenager who doesn't really want your involvement in anything, you will then start to think, ab kya karu? And by then, the world would have moved. So it'll be harder. It's not impossible ever. It'll just be harder.
Super. Let's take some audience questions. I mean, some of them, 3, 4 of them are here. I think I'll just take a couple that make sense to me. I mean, no offense to the audiences. They know I just like to have a little bit of a joke around. So Meera's got a very interesting question that, have you ever had a financial rock bottom moment? It's like a turning point of your finances. कभी ऐसा हुआ है? I mean, because you have been in the industry and probably, you know a lot more about investing first and then spending.
Personally, yeah. I mean, in a sense, I was not in. I was in the financial services industry. It was 2009, early 2009, and I was switching jobs. And of course, we know what happened in 2008-9, right? And the person I was supposed to join, I was an investment analyst with an AMC, and then I was moving with the CIO. And the person I was supposed to join, he just stopped taking my calls at one point because the industry was in dire straits, right? And income stopped for me abruptly. And the person I am, it was very, very difficult, very difficult. Even when I decided to take the switch from working for Mint to working freelance, I fixed at least 2 freelance assignments beforehand so that my bank account doesn't stop, right? But in that time, there was nothing I could do. My husband was also in his early career, so it's not like we had a lot of money. A year later, we had my children, and there were times where you spend so much on young infant. I have twins, so we had too much expenditure, and I just, in that time, I used to think कि कुछ बचेगा कि नहीं बचेगा, and I hadn't gone back into work. I went back. I joined Mint when my boys were 8 months old. I hadn't gone back yet. And when I joined Mint, it paid me very little compared to what my asset management salary was, right? So I've had a lot of up and down with my money. It's not always like a comfortable situation. What I never shied away from doing is making conscious choices with the money that I do have. And even when I lost that person who didn't call me back, and I didn't have that job, and I needed to then figure out what to do, I made a conscious choice that I don't want to go back to the industry, right? And I used the bonus that I had from my previous job to do a hairstyling course. That's a whole other story, but I used my money for something, and I didn't have a lot of money, and that course was very expensive. But I used that money to do that because I felt that I could learn something. I did learn something. I never took it on as a career, but I learned a lot about myself, and it was great. So everything, although we tend to measure it by how much money we are making from something, etc., a lot of choices need to be conscious, not because they will lead to higher monetary outcomes, but because It's also about upskilling yourself. It's also about investing in yourself and knowing yourself that much better. So again, I have had many instances of times where money is short and money is not enough. We've always been aggressive savers, so that comes to one's rescue eventually.
I think an entire generation will never forgive those greedy investment bankers in US for 2008 crisis.
I'm happy. I think it made me pivot, and I can't be more grateful for that.
Absolutely, and it gave us a super financial coach that we have in front of you. The book wouldn't have been possible because of it. Let's look at the good stuff then. Okay, Varda wants to understand about a simpler way of budgeting. Like thoda sa when it happens, na, when we start budgeting, we're a little confused. We feel restricted. अरे पैसा बचेगा कि नहीं बचेगा sort of a way. So what can be the tips for her?
So obviously the simplest way is to actually just give yourself hard allocation stops. And this is there on social media a lot, the 50-30-20 way, where you keep 50%. I mean, everyone defines it differently. 50%, somebody says 50% save karo. But the way I see it, that expenses are a lot today. So you will need 50% for your needs, and whether it's rent, EMI, whatever, you may need 60% also for that. But if you draw out a map and you color 50% with needs, 30% with wants, and savings 20%. If your needs are more than 50, then you take away from your wants. Okay, so shift a little bit from that 30% of wants into your needs. If you've covered the entire 30 and फिर भी needs नहीं हो रहे हैं, then you have to relook at some of those choices you're making, like the accommodation or the travel. Where are the needs going out of hand? Again, the first story in the book is a very good story for this, because she struggled initially, but she never stopped saving. Even if she saved 100 rupees, she saved. So don't compromise on the saving, because that will really help you later. But an easy way to budget is just do this. Give yourself hard stops on needs, wants, and saving. So 50 needs, 30 wants, 20 saving. Don't compromise on saving unless it's like a ultimate emergency. The first story, that lady actually stayed in a paying guest for a long time despite being highly uncomfortable, because she didn't want to overspend. She wanted to save, she continued to save, and she didn't want to overspend, so she continues to stay in a PG. Now she lives in a lovely 1 plus or 2 BHK, rather 2 BHK apartment alone, because she can afford it. But her savings habit is what has led her here. Very simple. It's not complicated. 50-30-20. Take away from the 30 if your needs are not getting fulfilled within that 50. Keep taking away from the 30. Leave at least 10% for savings. And nowadays it's really easy. You can save 1,000 rupees a month and invest it in equity. So you can, start building your wealth and growing your kitty right from the word go. You don't need a lot of, you don't need chunky amounts to do that. So keep it hard stops. Budgeting often is, not about this. The numbers are very simple in this. Nothing complicated about this. It's in habit and behavior. And I hear this from Gen Z a lot. But Mumbai is an expensive city, and how do I do this? And so I said to them that there's no other way. If you want to save more, you have to spend less. And somebody said to me, but what about living in the moment? And obviously this is not something that we have lived through, this living in the moment kind of thought, but it's a reality for young earners today. You can live in the moment, but live in the moment with 80% of your income, not with 100%. Just assume, this is the Japanese way of doing things, right? They eat 80% of the food, which is what is needed to fill your stomach. I mean, they eat up till they're 80% full rather than filling themselves up till they are completely satiated. So live in the moment with 80% of your income, forget about the 20%. And believe me, 5 years later, you'll thank yourself for having done that.
What about the NBFCs that give you all these loans, I mean, see, you have to also think from the side that the NBFC business is also good, right? I mean, we are in the finance profession.
So it is great, and there's nothing wrong with the NBFC business. For individuals, however, I cannot say it any other way. If you are taking loans to buy iPhones or to buy gadgets which you are going to eventually wear down, you're not going to, iPhone is not going to last you forever. It is not going to increase in value. Uh, One thing is fine, two things are fine. If you keep doing it, it'll keep piling up, piling up. Like I had a client whose house rent was less than his phone EMI. If you keep buying things on, you will reach a level where the life you lead today is unaffordable. If the life you lead today, you're living in the moment, sure, but you're leading a life that you cannot afford, then how will you afford your future life, right? And by doing this, you're only taking more away from your tomorrow than investing in your tomorrow. So, again, uh, loans are not bad. Take loans if you're investing in assets, investing in yourself. But if you're going to, be too casual, too frivolous with BNPL and some of those payday loans and stuff like that, then the consequences will stack up. There is, nothing else to say about this.
Correct. Absolutely. So let me just ask you a final question from my end before we wrap this podcast up. Suppose, Lisa, you're 21 today, 2021 today. There's this whole gamut of world right in front of you. What would your choices be in terms of money, career, family?
Okay, so I think career-wise, I'm very happy where I've landed. Um, Again, some of it happened by chance, but I used to write stories when I was as young as 7 years old. So some of it was not such a chance, right? I mean, I wouldn't have gravitated towards it if I wasn't keen on it. I would have definitely traveled a lot more when I was younger. I traveled a lot. I studied abroad as well. So there was a lot of that. But it's a tough one. When you think about yourself in that time and you think, going back, why did I make the choice I made? I think I would have made the same choice because I was the same person, right? So if I made a choice to do a certain thing, would I have made that choice differently? I mean, I would have had to be a whole different person for that. But I was not. So I don't know. I mean, this is a tricky question, but I would just encourage people to make choices which are aware and conscious. Things happen in life, a lot of things fall in your lap, a lot of opportunities come. Assess it truly with um, uh, being honest to yourself. Do you really want to be this person, right? And if you have two choices to make, whether it was when you were 21 or now, and if you have two ways you can go, um, which of those ways, you have to ask yourself, which of those ways will make you a version of yourself that you like? And which of those ways will make you more uncomfortable than what we are always uncomfortable with something. Which of those, if that way is making you more uncomfortable, or is that way making you the version of yourself that you like to see? And I think if you ask yourself some of these questions, if you make these big choices consciously, um, things just are easier.
Absolutely, because they come from the bottom of your heart. So
Yeah.
managing the hurdles become a lot more easier.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So with that, I mean, really, thank you for taking your time out today. I don't know whether you've noticed, we just crossed 75 minutes without, you know.
Oh, wow.
So
Oh,
uh, that's 15 minutes over what I had asked you for. So you've been quite gracious enough for me.
enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. I always love talking about this subject. We've met earlier in a different setting where it was, but always personal finance is like my pet subject, and I love talking about it.
So there's one thing that really brought me, I mean, if there's one thing that I'm taking back today from this conversation.
I hope there's more than one, but okay.
Yes, I mean, if that one thing is that, let's say, for example, we've seen women through hurdles, caregivers, ambitious women, entrepreneurs, career break. Your tonality of approaching all these things is completely positive, is completely look on the side of opportunities, not on the side of threats.
Absolutely.
It's a huge trait to have.
But that is the way you need to move forward, because if you keep thinking about what can go wrong, it probably will go wrong, right? So again, I lean a lot on the side of aware choices, well communicated choices, transparent choices. I lean a lot on that, and that really, and you'll see all these women eventually come to that point. If they weren't there already, they come to that point. So I think that's important. And money often is not the content of a lot of conversations, it is the context of so many things in our life.
So it's that hidden figure that you can't that you can't ignore. So
Simply can't, and you shouldn't.
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thanks, Jinay. Thanks a lot for having me. It was really nice, really lovely. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.